Thank you very much. Let me preface my entry into this forum by warning that where I am, there is rain and power is going on and off. So that is an experience that we may have to live with. And that is going to be a handicap. So I'll preface my very short remarks because I hold the view that this is not the time to make speeches. It is very early days yet. What we want to do is to get to acquaint ourselves with what the challenges are rather than making speeches. And I am happy that you, ladies and gentlemen, come together in this initiative where we want to take charge of the continent of Africa. Africa is a continent which we know has promise. Africa, we know, is a continent which, as we speak now, is divided. Africa, as we know now, is a continent which deserves better than it has received. And it's not lost on me that we are having this conversation at a time when we are celebrating the African Week, and specifically on Saturday, the 25th, we'll be remembering the day when 32 heads of states and government assembled in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and reiterated the fact that Africa needs to be united. We are celebrating the fact that the Organization of African Unity came into being, and with a clear agenda at that time, the exhortations of Kwame Nkrumah notwithstanding, the unity that he desired was not achieved, but it cannot be denied that under the Organization of African Unity, the struggle to liberate many African countries from the colonial yoke was achieved. We know that the liberation movement and committee was housed in Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, and many countries succeeded in regaining their independence. Ultimately, even the regimes that were recalcitrant, such as the South African and the Namibian, which was under South Africa, and of course, countries such as Angola, Mozambique, Cape Verde, Sao Tome and Principe, and others regained their independence, and ultimately, with the coming into the African fold, South Sudan in the year 2011. So that today, as we count, we have 54 African countries, all of which recognize that Africa needs to be united. We'll also remember the activities in the 1990s leading up to the conference in Sirte in Libya, which was organized by the late Muammar al-Gaddafi, and the transitioning of OAU into the African Union, which we now have, and which, as many of us know, has also not succeeded in addressing some of the critical issues that we want to be addressed. Africa is still a continent that lacks in critical areas. We can't feed ourselves. The number of conflicts that are going on in Africa, with the consequence that men and women are suffering in refugee camps in places such as Sudan, Central African Republic, Southern Cameroon or Ambazonia, in northern Mozambique, in Tigray recently, and in Amhara, and in Somalia, and in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The voices of anguish are alive for all of us to see. In agriculture, we still can't feed ourselves. You know that even with war going on in Ukraine, we had to rely on on grain from Ukraine, fertilizer from that part of the world. We know our education is suffering and our health systems are suffering. And if you listened only recently to Aliko Dangote, you heard him say that even for him, who is very active in the business arena in Africa, that he needs no less than 35 visas to travel across the continent of Africa. But people don't remember that in the month of January 2016, the African Union did actually launch an African passport, which has never been implemented beyond the launch. So on an occasion such as this, by way of introduction, we are simply saying that the African institutions as they exist today don't serve Africa well, whether it's the Pan-African Parliament, whether it's the Pan-African institutions dealing with agriculture, dealing with the judicial sector. They have no teeth to bite. And what we are reminding ourselves is that the time is now to re-energize those institutions and to ensure that we give practical meaning to the African Union. If we talk, for example, of Africa Agenda 2063, it is not a waiting game where we are sitting and waiting that come the year 2063, without any effort on our part, Africa will suddenly become industrialized. Africa will suddenly become free of conflicts. Africa will suddenly be capable of feeding ourselves. Africa will suddenly be a land of gold. We are saying that there is work to be that demand that we have individuals in these institutions who are prepared to work to ensure that the continent actually realizes our potential. And that is what we are putting on the table. That is what we are offering. We are saying that we have the desire, we have the capability, we have the passion to ensure that this is achieved. And once this is achieved, then this and future generations will be able to celebrate and to continue the effort where the torch is passed from generation to generation. We also recognize as our sons and outside the continent, very conservative estimates tell us that there are no less than 200 million persons of African descent in different parts of the world. And it is instructive that the African Union herself did recognize the diaspora as the sixth region of the African continent. How is it that we can incorporate them in this long but necessary journey going forward? So, ladies and gentlemen, as I said at the very outset, this is an introductory meeting, and by its very nature, it ought to be one that is short and concise and focused to the issues. It's early days, and as Chinua Achebe once said, you don't dance yourself lame. Rest my very brief presentation by saying we are happy to be here with you, and we are happy to work with you as we seek to liberate Mother Africa economically, culturally, spiritually, and otherwise. Thank you very much.
Yes, profound. Thank you very much, Professor PLO. Your address was a call to action. We all needed to hear that. And indeed, Africa needs to be better than what it has received. Also, how the visa demands across the continent are hindering the potential of the continent needs to be looked at. So I would like to just say that your vision for the future of Africa is not only inspiring, but also actionable. And your emphasis on unit and silencing of the guns, collaboration among African countries is something that can truly transform our continent. So we really stand with you in this mission and are committed to supporting these efforts. So moving on, I would like to open the floor to our Pan-African content creators in the house. Of course, after calling your name, please briefly introduce yourself, your channel, and to the media house that you represent. And also to ensure that we have enough time for Q&A, question and answer, please limit your questions to 2. each content creator, and also be concise and substantial as well. And then the professor will respond after each content creator's set of 2 questions. Great, so I would like to call upon Mickey from Tunacheki.
Hello, everybody. I'm Michael Omare from Tunacheki, and I hope you can hear me well. So my question for PLO is, firstly, you've said it's early days, and it's early days indeed, but have you submitted your application to the respective offices, or have you publicly mentioned your interest of becoming the chief to the media, and those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Okay, great. Prof. PLO? Probably he's having some connectivity issues as well. Okay, so since while we are waiting for the prof to connect again, I would like to ask Misty Bright to take care of the chat so that we can also factor in comments and questions that are being posted in the chat box. Misty Bright?
There are no questions yet on chat box.
Okay, great. So I'm seeing some hands that have been raised. So I would like to call upon Tseke. Tseke, you can take the floor. I don't know if I've pronounced the name correctly, but it's written, Tseke Nichabeleng. Okay, so let's move on to next. Ida, you can ask your question or your contribution or your comment. Ida.
The professor is having problems logging in. I mean, getting connection. I'm trying to, he picks up the phone and then it cuts off. He's having problems he's trying to get in.
Okay, thank you for the update. Hopefully you'll be able to get back to us.
Good evening, Nigeria time. Good evening, my people. This is Maaz Chema radiating from Nigeria. I just have to come in now. The network has been a problem, and I don't know. I went to my email box. I didn't get the message. I have to check my junk box before I got the link to come in here. I know we are all good. Happy to be here.
Thank you for joining Hitech. You're welcome. Okay, so Cetrocraft, you can say your comment or your contribution.
Okay, it's actually, I'm actually with two questions for the professor. I wouldn't know if it is going to be okay to ask the question now or to ask when is live on air with us.
All right. So if it's directly related to,
I'm here. I can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. We'll come back.
So
yes.
Let me just introduce.
Okay, so Professor is here. Oh, but the network is bad.
Okay, it's okay.
Okay,
Central
Professor.
Craft, you can it.
Okay, Professor, it's nice having you here. It's an honor having you here. This is Dio Cetro. I'm a wife, Joke Cetro. We are in charge of Cetro's blog. We do a little bit of touching on the youth in Africa in terms of empowering them with skills acquisition that they are interested in. But our question this evening are just so direct, so I'm rushing into it. Number one, Professor, what makes you think African Union will have a change of mind under you, considering the African mentality rework challenge that we have in this part of the continent? And I cite an example, the example of one outstanding, should I call him a Pan-African man? I think his name is Tai Solarin, that was always talking about what the government in Nigeria should do part-time. And at a particular point, the then sitting president decided to hand over a section of the economy to him to run and to see what all those areas that he has been campaigning on, that he should actually take charge of it. But at the end of the day, he ran into the challenge of the myopic African mindset, because a bank was placed underneath him to give loans out to the less privileged, to the poor, and at the end of the day, nothing was gotten from it. So the question now is, how do you think Africa, that needs a huge level of mind reset, brain rework, how do you think this Africa and these our fellow African people we actually produce the kind of results that you are looking for? That's one. Two, don't take this personal, but it's just as it is. The second one is, who are the angels you plan to work with? And how do you think your office can influence notable change in Africa? When I say who are the angels, we have always discovered that great minds like you that are passionate, they want to achieve results. At the end of the day, they are sold out by those Judas that they are both washing hands together and planning economic forum together. They be the one that once there is a transfer of this so-called hard currency.
Sorry, Central Craft. Can you please make it short and brief?
I've already understood these two questions, which I want to respond to. Number one, there are no angels. We are dealing with human beings in all their frailties, with all their shortcomings, with all their faults, including us. Even us, we are not angels. We will make our mistakes. We will run into difficulties, but this is incremental. If you've heard the story of the story told or retold by Wangari Maathai, the story of the hummingbird, he says when the forest is in fire, you can do two things. You can sit down and lament and find fault, or you can go with your little beak and bring in water. That is your contribution. So number one, there are no angels. We will work with those. There is no group of Africans who will be brought in who are different. Our duty lies in changing and not judging, because me and you who have our own faults, what we must do is to make every effort to ensure that those faults are resolved. So if I have a weakness It is your duty to point out those weaknesses with the firmness that will open my eyes and your eyes and make your contribution. And number two, there is not going to be dramatic change. This idea that there'll come an angel or somebody, to use this analogy, like Moses in the Christian Bible, will be parting Red Sea and summoning manna from heaven. There is no such thing. What one is going to do is to work with the people that you have to make a contribution in any event. The term of the chair of the African Union is a very short one. And what one does is to make one's contribution and create an awakening. The mind is the standard of the man. The fact that we are having this conversation in itself is instructive. We are saying that younger people must get involved. It is not a wrestling match where people will be sitting outside and watching the combatants fight it out. It is you who are the combatants, and those who are in there are simply creating an enabling environment, energizing the youth in different ways, addressing critical areas of education, addressing critical areas of mind change, addressing critical areas of trying to re-engineer and redefine what Pan-Africanism is. And critically, you must remember that this is an intergenerational journey. It will take even 400 years, my brother and sister. It is not something where you are going to have something you wanted today. There is no microwave solution. But what we want to do is to go there and reignite critical things. And what are those critical things? That number one, you mainstream youth participation, young people's participation. But you must also remember that being young is not a permanent condition. You are young today. In the next 20 years, you'll be old. So what you are trying to do is to ensure that we create an environment. One of the things that African Union must do is to ensure that Africans fund their projects. As we speak now, African Union is funded almost 70% by outsiders, which means they determine the priorities of the union. They determine the areas of focus. But if we begin to fund ourselves by persuading African government and African peoples. As it is now, African Union as presently constructed is a union which is run by heads of states and government. They are even the voters. Even in determining who is going to be the chair of the AU Commission, it is the presidents who will vote. And when they vote, and they vote in people who are proper and want to do the right thing, it will be the duty of such individuals to begin to democratize, and I'm using the word democratize very liberally, to begin to involve people a lot more in Pan-African initiatives. Right now, for example, you know that there is the Pan-African Parliament. How are the members elected? They are elected by national parliaments. One would want a system where there is more participation in the process. You know that there are Pan-African institutions such as the African Court, which sits in Banjul, the Gambia. Do the people know about them? Do we have Pan-African exchange platforms for young people? Do we have university exchange program? So there are many things to talk about. And I am one who believes that you try, because you can also paralyze yourself through analysis. You can give examples of those who failed. If you are looking for example of people who failed, you'll find them 10 out of 10 times. But there are examples of those who made a contribution. I believe, for example, during her reign, Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma made certain contributions. I believe that there are certain things that have happened under the African Union which only need strengthening. Africa Agenda 2063, if it is implemented, is a good thing. Africa Continental Free Trade Area, if it is implemented, is a good thing. The creation of the African passport in 2016, if implemented, is a good thing. The silencing of the guns, which was meant to happen in the year 2021, if it had been done, is a good thing. There are so many good things, and the time is now for us to stop judging ourselves harshly. If you look at the history of other regional bodies, they have their headwinds. The European Union has had its headwinds with people, with the Britain leaving the Union. NAFTA in North America has had its headwinds. The Caribbean countries have had their headwinds. The South American countries have had their headwinds. The Asian countries have had their headwinds. We are also going to have our headwinds and our tailwinds. And our duty and our calling is to remain positive. And when we are positive, we will ultimately achieve what we desire and what we deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to go back to the content creators and call upon Mickey from Tunacheki.
Yes, how are you, Professor? It's really inspiring to hear your words, and like you're actually very pragmatic about how the African Union actually works. So, and that's good. So my two quick questions are, first, have you formally submitted your interest or application for the position? And the other question is, have you publicly declared your intentions to the media, local, international, even social media? Yeah. So thank you again for taking the time to be here with us.
Let me answer that question by saying that the office of the chair of African Union is a very unique one. Under the present rules, which I've acquainted myself with, it is the countries that nominate. And thus far, there have been suggestions from three different countries, from Djibouti, from Kenya, and from Somalia. But if you look at the new rules, which I think I'm the only one who has responded to, I've written to the chair, the current chair, the president of Comoros, and all the 54 African countries expressing my desire. And once again, I want to inform this audience that this is something that one ought to treat with due circumspection, and things ought to happen at their time. It doesn't do people or anybody well to simply come out and say in the social media, this is what I am doing at this time. And I've told those whom I've talked to privately that this is something that is going to be timed properly. I've had consultations, some of which are confidential, which are guiding me, and I've told those who I've talked to, I stand guided and telling me, do things at the right time. This is not a popularity test in terms of you campaigning to Africans who will cast the vote. They have no vote. And you will remember that in this continent, for example, there are quite a number of countries which are going through an electoral process. Therefore, there'll be major changes in the continent in terms of political leadership. So in short, sharp answer to your question, I've submitted my request to the African Union. And the African Union, as you know, has been very silent on what the position is. But I can tell you, I'm intimately involved in following the goings on. But I'll do things at the right time, and I'll stand guided by those who are insiders as well as those who are outsiders. And I think that is the wise thing to do.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Just a quick reminder to our Pan-African content creators. So when I call your name, kindly introduce yourself and your media house or your channel, and then proceed to ask brief or concise questions. So now I would like to call upon Mika. Over to you, Mika.
Okay. How you doing? How are you? I'm on a Zoom. So, yeah. What can I?
Mr. Wallace, kindly
soft
mute
drink?
your microphone, please.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me be very realistic. Number one, when you are dealing with Africa as is presently constituted, remember you are dealing with 54 countries, each of which claims sovereignty, each of which have their own culture, each of which have their own tradition, each of which are trying to protect those sovereignties, each of which is under influence from foreign powers. So it is not going to be easy. The question that you are raising is the question that was raised, I remember, in 1963 in Addis Ababa. It was raised again in 1964 in Cairo. It was raised in 1965 in Ghana, in Accra. It has been raised, and when the African Union, it was raised in 1999 in Sirte, and when the African Union came up with what are called the Kagame reforms, to reform African Union for the purposes of ensuring that it is more people-friendly. These were issues that were being raised. So this is an office that requires diplomacy. It is not an office where you can go in and say, I'm going to do this. No, if you say that, you are lying, and I'm not in the business of lying. It is an office where you say, I'm going in there to try and use my best efforts at diplomacy to persuade those who are in charge of these countries to see the wisdom of implementing some of these things because it is in their best interest. And how do you do that? When you have the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, to which almost everybody has signed up, it then begins to make sense if you are telling Central African Republic that if you want investment, you had better make it easy for people to come into your country. So it is going to be an art in persuasion and in diplomacy, and you are going to use the goodwill of people that you are going to find in office, some of whom will oppose you, some of whom will want you to fail. So it is an act in diplomacy, and anybody who says, I'm going to promise to deliver this within this time limit will be lying and deluding oneself. But one of the things that I myself say is that Africa has had too many treaties, has had too many declarations. Let the next 3 years be the years of implementation, so that we don't talk about anymore. Let me give you an example. You've talked about the visa, and you've talked about the African passport, which was launched in the year 2016. Nobody talked. After the launch, there was no implementation plan. So if you have somebody at the center who is not constantly reminding the countries and choosing a few countries for purposes of piloting, then it will die. Look at the question of the Yamoussoukro Declaration of 1988 and 1999 on African free skies. We know that the inter-African transport is one of the most expensive. Nobody was implementing that. If you go into the area of health and you talk about the Abuja Declaration on health and 15% expenditure by each country on health, who was monitoring that? So I think one of the things that we must stop doing now is to come into the arena and keep on doing declaration after declaration. And one of my clarion calls, it is the time for implementation, not the time for recreation. It is the time for implementation. And you work at it, and you identify anchors of goodwill across the continent and work at it. That would be my response to your question. Once again, on the question of internet, is Africa remains dependent, and this calls into question what is the kind of investment that Africa makes in the area of research and development. If you look at the internet sector, if you look at all the terrestrial and non-terrestrial infrastructure, they are outside of the continent. If you look at the residents, even of the mobile money that we use in Africa, whether it's M-Pesa or Momo, you'll discover that the infrastructure, the backbone is resident somewhere in Europe or resident somewhere in the Arab world. And if there was anything that ought to have shocked us into activity, is the recent disruption in West Africa when the submarine cables were cut, and the recent one in East Africa, which has not even been resolved. So what we must do is to recognize, number one, is that science knows no boundaries, and use our men and women, and there is no shortage of men and women in our research institutions, in our universities, in the diaspora, who can begin to migrate us into systems that we can control. And even as we control and collaborate to ensure that if there is a disruption of this nature, we are capable of isolating these systems and priming them to function. It is not going to be easy once again, because there are those who are making money in the billions out of Africa's dependence. So it's going to require a resolve from both the political leadership and those who are in the economic arena to ensure that that is achieved. Look even at the question of currency. Today, the major currency transfer method that we use even within Africa is SWIFT, which is based in Belgium, I think, and IBAN. In other words, if I want to move money from Abuja in Nigeria to Windhoek in Namibia, the signal will first go to some place in Belgium or sometimes even in New York before the money hits your account in Windhoek. And these are things that can't be done. Many of you, some of you will be holders of Visa card or American card. Can't we develop these within the African banking system, which is improving by the day? And your third question on fundraising. In fact, there is already a commitment that had been made that Africans should wean themselves off this dependency. So fundraising is targeting the people. If you look at Africa today, and you are to earning something positive from African Union, you can even have a continental tax of 1 cent if you can demonstrate that it will be used for the continent. If you persuaded countries to make their contributions on time and use it in visible enterprises in Africa, people can make a contribution. But this must be a deliberate move. I would myself, for example, if you were to ask each of these individuals, some of the African entrepreneurs, and you tell them if you make a contribution to the African Union, you'll then have a tax benefit to it. There are different models that can be used. And these are some of the things that we ought to concretize going forward. Once again, and I am saying this almost ad nauseum, some of the things we are saying are easier said than done. But if you have the passion and you have the right team and you have the right ideas which are implementable and you create systems which are inheritable, so that if you create an environment, it is an environment that ensures that if I start a program today, whoever succeeds can develop that program so that in 10 years, it then has gained traction. This is the contribution that we'll make. And I want to reiterate that anybody who holds a public office goes there to make their positive contribution and an environment which is inheritable and sustainable for the general good. Those are my responses to your three questions.
Hello, hello, hello.
Yes, Ambassador William.
How are you? My apologies. I had a meeting with the American Embassy and I left a bit late. I raced down the highway to get home so that I can do the needful I was due to introduce on the agenda, but I see that my good friend and brother, Professor Lumumba, has taken up the mantle. I know he doesn't waste time whenever he has to speak. So I am just joining. I just got home. And so I am going to be brought up to speed. But just to say that, hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, just to say that it is fantastic that we now have the opportunity to hear directly from our candidate, the most preferred candidate, lay out his table as to what he will be doing. And it's very important what he has said. We are talking about implementation. The time for talking is over. You know, everybody makes declarations, say they will do this or that, and nothing is done. And that's why we need such a leader to be there to implement. And it means also finding other leaders among a team that he will build to carry out the implementation. And these will be specialists in their various areas. And one thing I wanted to mention, and that's why we are talking today, in that we need to have African development goals, a yearly plan. There are all these SDGs, etc., but we need to have a yearly plan to accelerate Africa's development. And both myself and Professor share the very same sentiments. That's why we have African Development Goals Initiative and Africacy, Africans doing it for themselves, by themselves, which leads to the point on funding. And myself have agreed on this, is that the African Union, like the European Union, will be the ones to
Ambassador Wallace,
sign on behalf of all the countries. What the Chinese and other countries do is
Ambassador William.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, your network is unstable.
Can you hear me?
Can you make it brief for the sake of time?
Okay. Anyway, I was just saying that I'm supporting what Professor is saying and was giving you a roadmap as well. He was giving you the silos, all the independent things that have to be implemented has been left untouched. But I was giving you a roadmap also of how we need to accelerate the African Union's role in moving Africa forward. But we can talk about those things a little bit further later on. But I just wanted to make my contribution and to let you know that I am here now. And please continue, if you can hear me.
Okay, thank you very much for making it to the event and your contributions. We appreciate that. And since we are running out of time, and I would like to remind the next people that I'm going to call to be also very short and precise. Don't just be brief with your questions, so that many people will get the opportunity to ask Professor questions. Okay, so let me move on to Abigail. Abigail.
Good evening. Okay. Not me. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. I'm calling Abigail. Yeah, Abigail. But of course,
I see 13 people have raised their hands, and you are going to have difficulty in managing this. If people could type their questions, sometimes it's a lot more efficient, because I don't see how you are going to manage 13 people who have raised their hands.
Okay, thank you, Professor, for the heads up.
Professor, the people he's calling now, sorry for interrupting, those are our content writers first. They have 2 questions each for you, and Abigail is there. After that, the audience can ask questions and they can write their questions in. Abigail is there. You can call her now.
Yeah, over to you, Abigail.
Okay, Your Majesties, my kings and queens, I'm happy to be here. My name is Abigail from Abigail Lucineri. So the question I have is, because lots of you have asked the questions I have in my mind, so I'm just going to brush through one of the questions. What is that singular thing we can do as a collective to change the situation of the continent? Like, what is that thing that we can do? That's my question. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let me take a few more.
Okay, Wongel Zelalem. Wongel Zelalem. Okay, if not present, let's move on to Diocetrus. Diocetrus. Okay, so all right, so the content creators, yeah, we are done with the content creators. So Prof, would you like to respond to Abigail before we move on to the audience?
The singular thing that I think young Africans must do is to organize and make demands for an active union. If you are organized and you send a single sentence petition with information and say, we are organized and we are speaking with one voice from south, west, east, central, and this is the voice of Africa, and we demand implementation of the things that have been declared, that voice will reverberate across the continent of Africa, and it will be a singular call for action, which is time.
Please, let's all mute our microphones if we are not called up to speak. Let's mute our microphones. Okay, Professor, you can proceed, unless if you
I've already unless I was not heard.
Okay, great. So before I move on, I just have a quick question to you, Prof. So considering that the conversation around development and change in Africa has been ongoing for decades, with numerous different Africans emphasizing the need for transformation. So I would like to ask that from your own perspective, what have been the key shortcomings in our approach to development thus far? Additionally, what kind of innovative strategies or maybe new approaches do we believe that we should adopt to catalyze like real change and steer the continent toward real and indigenous development?
Thank you. Number one, I think Africa has been hamstrung by dependence. Almost all African countries have their budgets and their national plans supported and dependent on external institutions. And if you have any doubt, if in any sector, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in the health sector, whether it's in the industrialization sector, whether it's in the mining sector, whether it's in the education sector, you'll find that we depend largely on institutions which are non-African institutions. And what they do is therefore to ensure that African institutions engage in activities which are not beneficial to the majority of Africans, but are beneficial to those other countries. That, I think, has contributed largely to the state of Africa as we see it today. And there is a lot of documentation to suggest that indeed this is the reality. If you read the book which has spoken to this very well, is a book by Ha-Joon Chang, The Bad Samaritans. If you want to read also the book by Dambisa Moyo, Dead Aid, and demonstrating how aid has made Africa to suffer in the manner that it continues. So I think dependency has been one of the things that has made Africa to stagnate. We appear to move, but it is motion without movement, and there is motion without light. Number two, I think lack of prioritization of critical areas that can spur economic growth. So that in our policy formulation, once again, you'll find that many African countries have depended on the IMF and the World Bank, and these institutions make prescriptions that are only self-serving. If you look at the history of Africa in terms of policy formulation, you'll find, for example, under what is called the Lomé Convention of 1975, when African countries entered into an agreement with European countries for Africa and Pacific, and many of these were designed to help Africa, to help the Europe, and to ensure that we continue to export primary products without value addition. The net effect is that we enter into arrangements, whether it is AGOA, whether it's under the WTO, which do not address our primary needs. And you will agree with me, in agriculture, we still export coffee that is merely just roasted. We export tea that is then processed elsewhere. We export cotton and import second-hand clothing. We export diamond, which is cut in different parts of the world. We export cocoa, which is then made into chocolate in Belgium and in Switzerland. And I think that this is part of the problem, that we have lack of prioritization. And number three, lack of investment in critical areas. We should ask ourselves, what is the kind of education that we are offering to our young men and women? And what investment have we made in that area? If it is in agriculture, if it is in health, if it is in energy, if it is we want to industrialize, we must invest in energy. So these are the things that, in my view, that have stood in the way or ensured that Africa remains a consumer of imported goods. Look at Nigeria until very recently, producing crude oil, exporting it, and then importing the refined one, importing fertilizer, importing asphalt. And we can also not forget that Africa has also been hamstrung by conflict, some of it which is engineered from outside. Right now, there is no activity going on in Sudan because of a conflict which has both internal and external factors with refugees. Look at Eastern Congo, look at Southern Cameroon, look at what is happening in Northern Mozambique. Hence the reason why it was said that 2021 would be a year of silencing the guns. And of course, lastly, governance. We have also had and politicians who have used their positions to rape the continent, so that if you look at the aid that we receive, you look at the migration, capital flight, the money that is kept by African politicians in Dubai, Jersey, Panama, and all these countries, all these factors conjoined have served to ensure that Africa remains in the begging position in which she finds herself. And the time is now to liberate Africa from that situation. Have there been attempts within Africa to do that? Yes. There are countries which have made modest steps when they recognize that they are to make the right decisions. I dare say that we saw that in Tanzania during the short reign of Magufuli. We saw that even in Rwanda, in the Rwanda after genocide. We saw that in Uganda during the first 10 years. We saw that even in Zimbabwe in the first 10 years. We see that in Botswana after the 1966 when they started trying to extract a lot more from their natural resources. So it can be done, but we are saying that we can no longer continue to celebrate baby steps while everybody is galloping into the fourth industrial revolution.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, there's a lot of work to do, and the time is now. I agree with you, Prof. Now I would like to open the floor to our audience. Of course, once again, for the sake of time, when I call your name, just be very brief and direct with your question so that we'll get many people to ask Professor questions. So, Guma? Guma, you can...
Are you hearing me, Victor?
Yes, but your voice is a bit low. You can increase your volume. Yeah.
The names of Guma from Uganda, that's the PLO Lumumba chapter in Uganda. I wanted to ask Prof. For example, I think that this candidate for the EU, it was selected for the East African region. So currently, I see that many heads of state in East Africa have already endorsed Mr. Raila Odinga as their preferred candidate. So I want to inquire, will he also go to those presidents for endorsement, or he will get other presidents from other areas for endorsement? And secondly and lastly, what are the means and strategies that can be used to bring the youth, us, the young ones, because we make up the biggest population, that's around 70% of the continent currently, on board to be more inclusive, and we uplift our continent going forward.
Thank you. There are three countries that have already declared their candidate: Djibouti, Kenya, and Somalia. And we are coming from the standpoint that that must be disrupted, because if you allow, first of all, it was supposed to be an open system of presenting candidates. And if you look at the rules which I've looked at and the qualifications, the candidates don't qualify. And I want you and urge you to look at the rules which are published by the African Union itself. It says who is qualified to apply. I've looked at the rules and I meet the qualifications and I have presented my application. Some of those candidates have no qualifications that are required. And some of these things must, in the nature of things, be confronted in the manner that is underpinned by the rules. Young people, I believe, can get involved in the manner that we are involving them, through the foundation and through other initiatives such as advocacy, and having your voices heard and coming out and not surrendering to the reality that exists, because those realities are the ones that we must, in the nature of things, change. And I want you to remember why I say that you must disrupt this thing. I've seen one candidate saying that that candidate has been supported by Organization of African Islamic Countries. Is that what you want? Is that what you want, that we want to play the religious card? When you try to start saying religion, and then you'll start tribe, then you'll start language and many others. So the time is now for young Africans to also think out of the box and force the issue. And I'm quite certain that if you came out strongly, and all these individuals who are presenting themselves as candidates, let them present themselves to Africans and let Africans hear them. And then the politicians who will cast the vote will then be informed by the voice of Africans, young and old.
Great, thank you. Next, Ms. Sadzi. Please just stick to one question and be brief. Ms. Sadzi, Raphael.
Thank you very much. My name is Mr. Raphael, calling from the Republic of Ghana. My question is, in the first place, I will commend Prof for this promising and encouraging vision. But the main problem with Africa now is our institutions, public institutions that have been established to fight corruption on the continent have been weakened by politicians. So it doesn't matter how good ideas you may have. If the people you are going to work with don't have integrity, it will be very difficult for you to achieve your aim and vision for Africa. So what is your vision and plan to make sure that public institutions are fortified, that they can never be influenced by any politicians, in order for us to use our scarce resource to improve the livelihood of the people? That is my question. Thank you very much.
The answer to your question is this, that it is in the nature of politics anywhere in the world to want to interfere in institutions. That is the reality. Whether you are speaking America, whether you are speaking Europe, politicians will always try to interfere. It is the duty of the individuals in institutions which are created to call them out when they want to interfere. And sometimes they will interfere, even remove you from those offices, but it is your duty. And if you look at it as intergenerational, so that you are there only for a moment, if you look at the history even of the countries that we say are successful, even let's look at the United States of America. Was it not the home of Watergate during Nixon? Is it not the home of what is happening with Donald Trump? But institutions can come and people can come and they'll be shaken, and that is how they become strong. The problem in Africa is that we have been too docile. Particularly the African youth. We must liberate ourselves from our docility. So the voices that you are beginning to raise, and you are living at a time when things are different. Today, through media such as this, you can shake the world if you are organized, if the voices are together. And I am saying that the time is now to remind ourselves that nothing good comes easy, that there'll be many individuals who will fall by the wayside because they wanted to do good. And the fact that they have fallen by the wayside does not mean that you surrender. You know, I look at many initiatives. Look at your own country, Kwame Nkrumah. Was he not trying to do good, great good? Is it not true that when he was overthrown in 1966, it was even illegal to read his books in Ghana? Is it not the truth that it was only rehabilitated in 1972 by Ignatius Kutu Acheampong? Is it not true that we now vote him as having been the greatest Africa of the millennium? Is it not true that he was in the neighborhood in Guinea-Conakry when he was writing his books, including Ghana, The Dark Days? Did he surrender? No, he did not. Because he did not surrender, we are here still propagating his ideas. So don't confuse a lapse as a defeat. We'll have many lapses in our journey, but that will not be defeat. And the fact that you young people and others who are older are there, if you, as the saying goes, that you take out one, 1,000 more will come. And if you take out 1,000, 10,000 more will come. If that is the attitude, then failure will never exist in your vocabulary. And that is the spirit that I have. That even if you go into this arena and you appear to fail, really you are not failing, because others are learning from your mistakes and then correcting themselves. And if you create an army of people who think in the right direction, then the disappearance of one of them really does not take away the beauty of the agenda. And that is how I think, and that is how I feel, And that is why I'm not frustrated. If you want to measure the success of a people or a continent in 60 years, then you are cheating yourself. Measure it in millennia. Then you'll not be disappointed.
Thank you very much for explanation.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Right now, I would like to ask Mr. Bright to read 2 or 3 questions from the chat box, and then Professor can respond before we move on to the audience again. Mr. Bright?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
All right, so I'll start with the first one from Treasure David. So she says, Prof, thank you for this opportunity to ask. We noticed that there is a huge gap in the continent support for SMEs. My team and I decided to host the Africa SMA Assembly and propose to institute a council, Africa SMA Council. We hope the African Union will endorse this. Now the question is, what do you think about this initiative, Prof? And how can the Union further pay attention to SMEs in the continent, as these businesses play a vital role in the African continent? Advise us on the best way to go about this.
Thank you.
Can you read 2 more, Mr. Bright? 2 more questions, so that Professor can respond to 3 questions here.
Okay, the next one I'll pick is from Nandala Geoffrey. So it says, to Professor, why is it African leaders always come together to sign contracts of eliminating geographical boundary restrictions on trade, but this just ends on paper and never effected on ground? And finally, I'll pick from Smart FBKM. It says, I would like to have the professor's opinion on the arrival in power of the Russians on the African continent. Should we see Russia as a savior of Africa? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me start with SMEs, small and medium enterprises. And I am aware that within the regions, there are initiatives by SMEs in SADC, in East Africa, in West Africa, in Central Africa, and even in the Maghreb. And the whole idea of the SMEs was that you wanted to incubate small and medium enterprises in the hope that they will then, if they are supported, graduate to become the big players in the African market. Different initiatives and different interventions have been made in terms of funding them, in terms of that they incubate startups in different areas. But some not succeeded because of funding models. So that if you look at the mortality rate of some of the SMEs, it has been very high. I know, for example, in East Africa, the mortality rate is anything between 20 and 30%, and even that is conservative. First of all, because of the interest rates. If you are charging interest rates at 20 and 26%, then you cannot make your products and your services competitive. And you will now prefer to have an appearance of production even within their own arena, but the bulk of the work is done by people from China, so that you find products which are being labeled as made in Rwanda, made in Kenya, and all these, but the production is actually in different, particularly in China. Progressively, I see quite a number of goods coming from Indonesia, from Malaysia, from Vietnam. And why is that? Look, first of all, the cost of money. Number 2, the cost of energy. If you look at the per unit cost of electricity, and you look at all these other factors, it makes products that are made by SMEs or services that they render out of the reach of the market, which is their target market. How can it be done in order to improve it? First of all, I think it is important to ensure that we have what I call enabling and facilitating government policies. Deliberate policies must be made by governments in Africa to create an environment that is enabling, and that will ensure that you tackle the questions of factors of production and inputs in production. It will ensure that you have legal regimes and tax regimes that are going to ensure that they are not pricing themselves outside of the market. And you also want to ensure that there are linkages with industry and other segments of the private sector. And there are now private sectors, or other elements within the private sector, which have graduated into big business, which can, in the nature of things, patronize some of these SMEs. First of all, it will have to start regionally within East Africa. Do you have rules and regulations that are going to ensure that these particular SMEs are protected? Because if you don't protect your nascent industries, they are going to be taken out of the market. Because the cost of production within our countries is very high, as I've already said, because of electricity. So there are certain areas that you must ring fence. And it is in this regard that I think that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is going to be very useful. Useful in the sense that the idea is to make Africa a single market, so that if you are engaged as an SME in production of a particular product, you then don't have to be victimized by tariff and non-tariff barriers, which will make your products unaffordable. If we actually actualize this, then the SMEs are going to benefit from the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. And that is going to require some work, because there'll be a pushback. I already see pushback. Quite a number of countries are entering into long-term arrangements with the United States of America, with Europe, and they are going to be caught up by the WTO rules. So it is going to be a major effort that is going to be put in to ensure that we protect and indeed promote SMEs, so that they don't remain SMEs forever. It is not the idea that an SME should remain an SME forever. It should be that they are graduating within a certain period to be the major players. The second question is about contracts, and it comes to the question of what I call implementation. Take, for example, within Africa today, and I know that Kenya and Ghana did a test dry run, if you may, of importation under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and the commodity was tea, and they exported the tea. So first of all, it's going to require mind change. If you go to Ghana, what they consider to be tea is Lipton, which they have been used to in terms of branding from the United Kingdom. If you therefore take tea, which is Kericho Gold tea from Kenya, you've got to change mindsets. That is going to be very important. So the failure rate and the non-implementation level of African contracts is born out of very narrow thinking. People thinking that if you open your borders, then the goods are going to flood your market. I think this is one of the things that we must ensure to remove from the mindset of different countries. And each country or different African regions have certain advantages. If Ghana is producing, Ghana, Togo, and La Côte d'Ivoire are in the production of cocoa, and we want to value add, it is better that you locate the industry that is going to do that in that part of the world. If you are going to have copper wires, it's better that you locate it in Zambia, where you are going to get the product. If you are going to talk about cobalt and you want to make telephones, it is better that you locate it in the Democratic Republic of Congo. If you are talking about tea and coffee, it is better that you locate it in Kenya. If you are talking about leather, it is better that you locate it in northern Nigeria or in Ethiopia. And once we do that, the whole question of location of industry and implementation will ensure that people know that the larger is better to have 10% of an elephant than to have 100% of a rabbit. That big thinking is what is going to liberate Africa from this, what I call being a big fish in a small pond. Be a fish in the ocean, and in that way, you'll ensure that your economy grows bigger. The last question, let me say this. For the moment we are welcoming Russians and Chinese Turks. And let me tell you, every country does what is in their best interest. Russia is engaging with Africa to ensure that their best interests are served. In other words, the Russians have defined what they want, and they have defined that by dealing and relating with the Africans, they will gain it. It is our duty as Africans to define what we want. Once we have defined what we want, we will relate with Russia, we'll relate with China, we'll relate with the rest of the world on the understanding that that relationship is not parasitic. But to imagine that Russians or Chinese are angels who are going to be better than the former colonizers is to delude ourselves. All of us have to have our hands and our guards up and define our interests, and then our relationship will be beneficial to us, and our relationship will be of the kind that protects our interests. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Professor. Unfortunately, when we have great and interesting discussions, listening to Professor PLO Lumumba, time always competes against us. But I'm just going to try to squeeze just one question from Miss Edwina. Please just take like 10 seconds to be direct with your question, so that we'll stay on time.
Thank you.
Over to you.
Thank you, my professor. My question is, what will be your first? What will be your agenda? The first 3 things that you aim to achieve when you take office within the next 3 to 6 months?
Victor, I wanted to talk. Victor, please.
Professor?
I'm waiting for the gentleman who wants to talk. Then I answer them in one fell swoop.
Okay.
Okay, was that Uncle? Yeah, just take 5 seconds. We are running out of time.
Oh, I've been raising my hand. Master Chairman, I've been waiting.
Thank you, Victor. Thank you very much. I'm Bida Charles from South Sudan. My question goes like this. I believe the Western
I think I can speak since he has disappeared.
We can't hear you anymore.
He has disappeared. Can I chip in? Can I chip in?
Can you? We are running out of time, unfortunately. So sorry for that.
He disappeared. I thought I would use this opportunity.
In enriching the culture and tradition of Africa, we are good, and we can boost that with our economy, and everything will be okay. What is his plan? Thank you.
Number one, the first thing that one must do, of course, to acclimatize a SWOT analysis of what has been happening. I think it is very critical to, when one goes into an office and one takes the arrogant position that they know what has been happening from an outsider's position, that will be deluding oneself. And one of the things that one must understand is to understand the institution and the human resource that is available to you. number one. Number two, to ensure that the human resource is aligned to the priorities of the organization, because you are not getting into an organization that has no agenda. And the key things now in the African Union is practicalizing Africa Agenda 2063 and Africa Continental Free Trade Area. I think those are the anchors that one must deal with. And then the third thing that one must deal with is financing. I think it is going to be very critical that one talks about financing. And then number three is ensuring that relationships are reanalyzed and redirected. How does the Commission relate with individual countries? And once one has done that in the first 3 months, then you go into what I call prioritization of agenda items. And one of the things that I would myself do is to ensure that I involve the critical mass, involving the people in the activities of the African Union. That, I think, is going to be very critical. If you walk in many African capitals and you ask 10 people what they know about the African Union, I can guarantee you that 8 have no idea, apart from telling you this is the African Union. They don't even know the difference between the African Union Commission and the Union itself. So making the Union a people's organization would be one of the things that I would want to do in the first 6 months, and of course, having an implementation plan, which will be informed by my own what I consider the 10-point agenda, which will be how you go into the office and you say, these are the things that I want done. But I would run away from what has harmed many African leaders. This thing that came from the United States of America, I will do so in 100 days. I know its history. I will never say that. I know the circumstances why that was said. And many people start getting judged on the basis, you said I would do this in 100 days. When you are running a marathon, you don't judge yourself after 100 meters.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Lumumba. Before calling...
There is the gentleman from Sudan who asked, I didn't quite get his question, but he did mention something about culture. And one of the things that I want to remind ourselves is that we are very diverse. And Ali Mazrui has written a book called The Power of Babel, not the tower. He calls it The Power of Babel. And I love that book because Ali says it is our diversity, which if properly used, which can be our strength. There are things that our cousins who are the Arabs in the north, in Tunisia and Algeria, can do better than those who in the Central African Republic can do. And there are things that the West can do that the East can do. If we put all those things in place, then what we consider to be a curse can actually be a blessing. And I hold the view that that is very critical. And one of the things that we are going to try and do immediately is to give impetus to a lingua franca. It is beautiful that we have already accepted Kiswahili as a lingua franca, which is being spoken by nearly 200 million people, so that even technologically, we begin to think in Kiswahili. And that does not mean that we stop speaking English and French and Portuguese. The more languages we can speak, the better we are in terms of interaction. But when we go to these forums, we say, I'm going to address my people technologically and otherwise in this chosen African lingua franca, and have an African youth brigade, which will be present in every village and every hamlet, because these things must be taught in our schools so that African Union becomes African, Pan-Africanism becomes a taught and examinable unit in our schools. It is only in that way that you'll begin to grow a generation of people who think in the manner that we want them to think. But I want to rest my case in the knowledge that justice cannot be done to these subjects during this very short interaction. But I hope this gives you an opportunity to understand the standpoint from which I come. And I'm very ready interactions such as this are also meant to expose you to my thought process in the hope that you can improve where you think I am weak. In my presentation, there are things that you will have gathered, and you are free to cross-fertilize and cross-pollinate my ideas, and you tell, but you think like this, and I'm one who believes that learning is a lifelong process.
Thank you, Professor. Before calling Miss Abigail to give us a vote of thanks, I would like to Miss Abigail to give us a vote of thanks. Can you hear me? I would like to. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can
Great.
hear you. Yes, we can hear you.
So before calling Miss Abigail to give us a vote of thanks, I would like to call and give the next 2 minutes to Ambassador Wallace to give us the closing remarks.
From Nigeria.
Okay, please, can you mute yourself when you're not speaking? Kindly mute yourself. So I would like to call Ambassador Wallace to give us the closing remarks. Ambassador Wallace?
Meanwhile, he is coming. Can I get 2 minutes as request?
Sorry, please. Let's stick to the rules. We have house rules. When you are not called to speak, kindly not mute your microphone. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear. We can hear you, Ambassador. Proceed, please.
Thank you very much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow Pan-Africanists gathered here today, this is a monumental occasion for us where we have been able to hear one-on-one to those who are passionate about Pan-Africanism and the role that the African Union has to play in developing Africa, that our candidate, Professor P.L. Lumumba, has been able to demonstrate, I think, quite succinctly, his vision, his mission, his plans, his wherewithal to show and demonstrate that he is aptly qualified to do this job. And it is our, and I'm saying our and I'm underlining it is our work to ensure that all that we do as the core team that set this in motion, that we align with what his plans are, we align with the vision and the mission to get him there, and then be there to support him all the way through. I think he couldn't be clearer in mapping out that the key thing, which is something that we have all been worried about, is the implementation of all these levels of utopia, that we will do this, we will do that, but nobody has the ability and capability to follow through. Everybody decides that they want to wine and dine with the Europeans, with the Asians, and go with their begging bowls, which those are the things that he has refused. He will not do. And absolutely, we must ensure that he sticks to those rules as well. And that is what we are there to do, to support him. He has aptly demonstrated that he has a plan, he has a vision. And those plans and visions has outlined where the African Union needs to change, the paradigm shift that we need, and we need it in a hurry. The acceleration of Africa with all its raw materials, and he already gave some beautiful demonstrations. Locate factories, locate productivity where we have the natural resources so that we add value. Those are key points to take away. Put a brigade in absolutely every village, so that everybody is demonstrating that they understand what the African Union means. Because the African Union means that we are all part of Africa. Every child should know the history of their continent. Every child should know what the vision of their country, because these are the ones that we are going to hand over to the baton. So some of the ideas, I want you all to build on that and start on it. Not just that he's talked about it today. I want to see in every village, people start, putting together, brigades, to start to protect the interests of their resources right now. A factory in every district, those are things. Transferring of skills, transferring of training. We want to be shareholders, not wage earners. Those are key things that we have to implement as Africans on the continent. I must say that our team has put together an excellent platform for Professor to be able to talk to those who are committed to this vision and those who are committed to the job that he has on hand, which is absolutely very tough. But he's made it clear how he's going to go about his even first 3 months, doing a SWOT analysis, making sure that we find the weak points. And those that he has missed out, he has asked for adding to it. So, ladies and gentlemen, the closing remarks is that we now have a leader who we can trust and who, if he sticks to what he says he will do, we have now the change that we want for Africa. And the Africa Union is the only entity that can bring this about, because singularly, all of the African countries singularly are like lone wolves in a herd. They get picked off by the lions, and we don't want that anymore. We now need to have a single currency, a single passport, a single trading platform, which is started by the ASCFTA. We need to move away from SWIFT. We already have PASS, which is the system of payments. All those things now we need to implement in a hurry so that the country, the continent, can move all of Africa forward. The youth must be empowered. It's 70% of the continent, and that is our duty, to empower them, train them, mentor them. Those are important things which he's already doing. So if we want a reference for what our leader is doing, he has already demonstrated more than any other candidate that he has been demonstrating Pan-Africanism, mentorship, and those are the qualities that we need in a leader. Selfless service. Thank you, and thank you all of you for coming onto this platform and supporting our chair, and we now get to work. I will want you all to get in touch with Edwina and the team, who are doing a great job behind the scenes to ensure that our declaration that we made in Malawi last year was not talk. We have been implementing and working towards making sure that Professor gets to the chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. So I would like to call upon Miss Abigail to give us the vote of thanks before moving on to the closing with Mika. Miss Abigail, vote of thanks.
Huh?
Let's mute our microphones, please.
Okay, I'm here. All right.
Yes, please go on.
All so much for the time. All right. I think the ambassador have said it all. There's nothing to add anymore. We are together with family, and the truth, we have no other place but Africa. So in all that we do, is just that.
Yeah.
There is no try our best to see that we focus and help our motherland, and we can do this together. And with the help of the professor as well, a collective job, we will actually actualize whatever it is that we put in. So thank you all. Thank you, the professor, for your time. Thank you, content creators. Thank you, the ambassador. Thank you, our queen, Edwina. Thank you, all of you, your majesties. And I hope that very soon we'll have another meeting like this, because I believe there's a lot of questions in everybody's mind. So thank you all. Thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ms. Abigail. Mika, please, can you give us the closing prayer?
Thank you so much. I'm just going to raise a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for today, for granting us this opportunity to come here from all across the world to discuss and to talk about the fate of Africa, and most importantly, to talk about our dear professor for the AU Commission Chair. God, we thank you for allowing us and for blessing us with such a beautiful people and everything that we have in this continent. We have everything we need. And I know that most of our people, Africans, inside and outside of the continent, have been crying and praying and working hard day and night to make sure that we secure the future for our children and the next generation. We thank you because you see our zeal, you see our desires and determination to bring about change to our generations. So we pray as we move towards that direction, pray that you give us strength, you give us wisdom, you give us understanding, you give us love, God, to keep pursuing that vision that you have placed in our hearts. We pray, God, for these difficult times that we're going through. And we pray, God, for these few months that we're waiting. God, we pray that your will be done. But most importantly, we're ready, we're prepared, and we want to stand and we want to step out in the action and just to do what we're supposed to do to bring about change in this continent. We're no longer going to complain or victimize ourselves or just sit back and watch, but we are going to participate. We're going to do everything we can in our power to bring that change. And we believe that you're with us, you're beside us, giving us strength, comforting us, and leading us in the right direction and to make the right decision and the right choices for our people. God, we thank you and we believe in all these things. In the name of Christ, I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next time.
Amen. Amen.
Okay, thank you, guys. So we know there are a lot of questions that were not addressed, and some people wanted to ask questions, but Mr. Ruto?
All right, guys. As you have seen, that is the meeting, and that opportunity our dear Professor Lumumba. I'm just here, guys, to share with you. Listen to
Let us dedicate ourselves to fight together for lasting peace and justice on earth. Oh, sons and daughters of Africa, flesh of the sun and flesh of the sky. Let us make Africa the tree of life. Let us all unite and join together to give the best we have to Africa. The cradle of mankind, the fount of culture, our pride and hope and break of dawn. Oh, sons and daughters of Africa, flesh of the sun and flesh of the sky. Let us make Africa the tree of life.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm just a little here right now because I want to share with you guys the final remarks of this meeting today with our dear Professor Pielo Lumumba. I had an opportunity to ask 3 questions, and some of you were here at a time, but you did not hear me because I was actually they could hear me from the platform Google Meet, but you guys did not hear me here on YouTube because I actually forgot to turn on the audio here for you guys to hear that. So I am sorry that you did not guys get to hear what I was saying, but most importantly is I'm going to share with you guys the questions that I asked here today, and just kind of like to finalize and to do a little recap before sharing the video that I made, particularly to call upon all Africans to actually stand with Professor in this time. So let me just say this, that 3 questions that I asked. First of all, if you're joining right now, don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on notification button. You can follow us on our social media on Instagram, X, and TikTok as well, Mika Chavala everywhere. And please, the request is this. You see this banner here on the screen. Please send a 30 seconds video to our email, oneafricaofficial@gmail.com, stating your name, country, and explaining why PLO should be the next chair of AU Commission. Very important. So please send those 30-second video stating that. We'll be sharing all these videos on social media as a campaigning. Basically, we are not really going to vote for him, but we want to put pressure on leaders and on our states for them to know that we actually want PLO to become the next chair of African Union. You guys, if you had an opportunity to listen to him here today, I think you've heard a lot of things that we've spoken about, and this is not going to be the last time. We're going to keep on having more conversation with him, and perhaps later on when he start announcing in the media and everywhere. I actually did a request a long time ago for him to come and to have a conversation here with us, so hopefully that time will come. But in the meantime, if you want to participate and you want to support, there's no voting ways. The only way you can do is by sending your 30-second video in oneafricaofficial@gmail.com, stating your name, country, and explaining why PLO should be the next chair. What we're going to do is we're going to put these videos together. We're going to share them in our shorts, but also we're going to put them together, share as a single video from all Africans inside the continent and outside the continent, supporting our dear professor. All right, that is very important. And sharing with you 3 questions that I had an opportunity to ask Professor. The first one, it was about the AU passport, because African Union passport was introduced to us in 2016, and the dream, it was for it to be distributed across the continent of Africa by 2018, but there were no initiative taken. Until today, we don't have African Union passport. Only people who are working in the African Union headquarters or leaders, they actually have African Union passport. And Aliko Dangote, the richest man in Africa, he actually asked that question a couple of days ago. He stated that for him, in order to travel within the continent of Africa, he needs 35 different visas. It's more difficult for an African to travel within the continent than Europeans, because most of them, they don't need that much visa. They can come to our country without needing any visa. So my question was, okay, when you become the AU Commission chair, what will be the strategies, and how are we going to be able to actualize and to actually make it possible for this AU passport to happen? And this is what he said. He said that, if I'll be lying to you if I promise that, okay, it's going to take like 1 year or 2 years for us to get this. No, he said the reason why this has not been happening because of the this unity that we have there in the continent, right? And this is something that needs to for all the leaders of the state to come together and to agree on the same agenda in order for that process to be processed to all other countries. So for him, the best he can do is that he will pressurize. He'll pressurize these powers as much as possible. He'll push that agenda like never before in order for us to have actually that passport. He'll push as hard as he can, and that's basically what he said. And I think since we are also advocating for African Union passport, and by the way, guys, if you did not sign the petition that is a One Africa right now, I'm sending the link in the comment section. Please go and sign there. That is us advocating for One Africa passport. And if you want to participate in that movement as well, the best thing you can do is you can actually just sign up that petition I shared in the comment section. All right, go ahead and sign up that petition, and it's going to be amazing. Basically going to be joining this movement of One Africa passport right now. So that basically what he said. And the second question that I asked about internet blackout, that, you know, this issue happened in western side of Africa on March, and right now it's happening in eastern side of Africa. You know, how is he going to be able, my suggestion was like, don't you think this is the time to have our own satellite in order for us to use our own internet instead of depending on their internet, because they can cut down anytime. And what are we going to be able to do about that? Africa as a continent, we are able to actually have our own satellite right now, and the only organization that can do that is African Union Passport. African Union organization, to actually push that agenda to make it happen, so that we may be independent and not dependent. And according to his word, he basically say that the main problem that Africa has right now, we are very dependent in almost everything, in education, in everything. We are so dependent, and in order for us to move forward, we need to get to a point where we'll be independent. And he say other things that I don't actually remember. You guys can go back and check it out. The final question that I asked is how are we going to be self-funding organization, because more than 70% of African Union is being funded by, you know, European Union and other organization. You know, whoever feeds you controls you. So basically, the organization is being controlled because we are not paying money for it. Somebody else is paying money for us to run our work. Do you think they want you to be united? No, they don't want it. So how are we going to be self-independent organization, self-sufficient, self-funding organization? That was the third question that I asked, and he answered that question as well. So please, you can go back and watch this live stream to see what he said about that. Okay, to finalize, I really appreciate for everybody who came. I already prayed during our meeting. I thank God for everything. It has been a while, guys, doing this live stream, but I appreciate for everybody who has been joining. We have a lot of people. We have more than 70 people actually watching us from X, formerly known as Twitter. We have we have more than 30 people actually watching from YouTube, and also we have some of the people watching on Instagram. Somebody said here, let me read the comment from Becky Bear. I say, August 2023, the level of investment from both the private sectors and government in the AU has been an ongoing topic of debate and concern. This all play a crucial role on all the topics you are picking. Appreciate. Thank you so much, Becky Bear. Do you mind to DM me that thing, those information? Please DM me on my Instagram, and then we're going to come back to talk about it. I think it's very important. So please DM me with those informations, and then we'll definitely talk about it. Let me see. I have so many comments here. There's so many questions. You know, I asked those 3 questions, you know, representing you guys, representing the family here. Actually, the final question about, you know, self-funding organization, I saw it in the comment section. I asked you guys to share your comment, and you did. So I asked that question as well. I appreciate for everybody who came, because most of the time I actually want to represent you guys. I don't just want to come up with my own agenda. So One Africa, One Passport is agenda that we've been advocating for like more than 3 years right now. And we have a petition going on. You guys, please go and sign up. Let me show you this petition. It'll be really amazing to show you guys, okay? The only thing that we do right now is this one. You know, it's been a while. This petition right here, we are pushing. The only thing that we can do is actually to push for One Africa Passport to happen. One Africa right now. One Africa right now. And this is all to the head of the states, African Union and Pan-African Parliament, to all of them. We want to push as much as we can to get as many millions of signature for this one, in order for us actually to have a say. So you can go ahead. I share the link in the comment section, and the links in all of our videos that are here. You can just go in the description and click the link and see what we wrote. First thing that I always encourage, please go and read the details. You have to see everything that we wrote in this thing, our agendas and everything. After you do that, you know, please, you can sign, and after signing, you can share. You can share with your neighbor, you can share with your friend, you can share with anyone you want. It's very important, you know, for that. Okay. Do that as well. There's so many questions here, and I'm sorry guys, I'm not gonna be able to answer these questions, you know, but the best thing I can do, I made a video when I was in Zambia a couple months ago, advocating for this, raising my voice about. I think I was the very first person on social media to release this video, actually asking PLO Lumumba to take up the form and also to run for AU chair. And he actually did, you know, a couple weeks later, he took up the form, and right now he has already submitted and he's running for that. So we just want to appreciate for us as Swahili Nation, as SNOA, to be on the front line, to want to bring bring change. And I appreciate you guys for being a voice, the family that are always here. You guys are encouraging us. You guys are the voice. You're raising your voice through the videos we share. Even though recently we have been having a lot of limits, but you know, I read your comments, guys. I see what you're raising, and sometimes we just take actions. I might not be able to reply, you know, some of them, but you know, we just go ahead and we take action and we do whatever that you guys suggest. Every time when I share and I say, okay, guys, let me know your thoughts, I'm actually really wanting to know your thoughts. For example, today here I had I think I had only two questions. So I asked you guys, let me know if there's anything you want to ask, and one person asked, and I was able to represent that question, right? We say that our mission is to be the voice to the voiceless, because we believe, I know, voice to the muteless, because we believe everybody has a voice. But the thing is, we're muted. There's some circumstances that are muting us and we're not able to raise our voice. So we as a SNOA, as Swahili Nation, you're soon to be a media, because we want to be the biggest media in the continent as an Swahili Nation network. We are here to raise your voice, guys. I'm not here with my own agenda, but I'm here representing your agenda, your needs, and what you want to see in Africa. Our brothers and sisters in the diaspora who are main supporters of this channel, I want to appreciate you guys. We're here to raise your voice as well. There's a lot of things that you guys are concerned about. Please don't hesitate to reach out at oneafricaofficial@gmail.com. Let us know. Don't forget to suggest. Let us know. We'll represent that, and we'll present that, and we'll do whatever it takes to bring that to pass. And if you don't see us as much as active on here on YouTube or on our social media, it's because there's other things that are going on behind the scene and we try to develop. There's a lot of cool projects that we're working on right now. I think we'll be able to present them after we launch them, but there's a very cool projects that we are very determined, and we're really, you know, hungry and angry for the change and want to see them actualize. I won't talk about it anywhere, because don't tell your enemy your plan, right? So we're just gonna keep that like that, but just know that we are working so hard behind the scene, preparing these cool projects. You'll be happy about them when the time is right, and when we officially launch, you guys will be able to see all of them. We'll share with you. Continue to support. If you are not a member, please join the membership. That's one of the way that you can support what we're doing here in Swahili Nation. The link is in the description. If you want to join Patreon, you can become my patron as well. That you'll be supporting the work we're doing right here. Or if you want to support just one-time support, you can use PayPal. The link is also in the comment section. And I want to appreciate somebody actually sent something on PayPal the other day, and we actually reached out to her we reached out to her, you know, appreciating her for the donation. So when I don't see here right now. Oh yeah, this one. Tavonga Tafuma. Somebody, Tavonga Tafuma, actually from the United States. I was looking at the details. He is coming from Springfield. This is Massachusetts. What kind of name is that? Massachusetts. Yeah, it's coming from there, and this person actually donated through our PayPal. Sometimes I'm really surprised, because sometimes you spend like 3 to 4 months, you know, quietness, and then just one day out of nowhere you see somebody actually, you know, donated. Whatever, it's accepted. If it is $1, if it is $2, you just know that you're helping and supporting us, because we have a team and we have people who are working day and night. Not necessarily here on the media, because this is just one of the ways that we use to bring our message alive. But we have other, you know, we have an organization, right? And the media is just a single part of it. But we have an organization, foundation, that is running every single day. We're in the office every single day. We're working, and we have people who are working. We have people who are receiving. I wouldn't even say salary, because, you know, that's, yeah. It's like that. But we have people who are actually dedicating 24 hours to work for the foundation, including me and other, 2 guys who are supporting, and other guys are actually, you know, the reason why they're not doing full-time job, because there's no income to pay them, right? So you guys, when you give that support, you're actually supporting us and helping us to actually be able to meet those needs, especially with the people that we're working with, and also running these platforms. We appreciate you so very much. I cannot wait to get back on the road. I would love to visit another country very soon, and I'm just sitting here waiting for the right time, and whenever God say go, we'll be out there and go. All right, to do. I appreciate for everybody watching from the United States. I told us support PLO Lumumba and One Africa Passport. Actually, I would love to see it through AU, which will free up travel. Exactly, man. Exactly. That's what we're getting for. Thank you for everybody who is joining, everybody who is liking, everybody who is subscribing, everybody who is sharing. It is very important. There's something that I haven't been saying, but for the past like 3 months, we went through, I would say, a difficult path for the past 3 months here on YouTube. Difficult path. Talking about the viewers, viewership, it went really down. The first thing. Second thing, we had 2 strikes. Having 2 strikes, it means if we had 1 more strikes, this platform would have disappeared for good. You will never see Swahili Nation. You never see anything. So even myself, I slowed down a little bit because I was like, okay, I have to adjust, and I have to be ready. If anything happens and we lose this platform, then I have to be ready to live without it. So even myself, I adjusted myself, my mind, my everything, ready that, okay, if we lose, then praise God. All right, we're just gonna know what we're gonna do next, because once you lose, then you cannot come back through the same name. So with all being said, if you go to our main page on YouTube, we have other affiliated channels. Go and subscribe to those channels as well, so that if anytime anything happened to this main channel, you'll be able to find us in those other channels. But not only that, that's why I encourage you to follow us on our social media as well, because if we lose this channel, then you'll be able to get those information from our social medias and to share with you guys what will be our next step to do. So we lived with 2 copyright strikes for 3 months, for the past 2 months, for the past 3 months. So the viewership went really down. We used to have more than 1 million, sometimes even 4 million in a month, but it went all the way to 300,000 a month. That's how viewership went down. And I was just sitting waiting that, okay, because anybody can do strike anytime and you could lose anything. So I was like, all right, God, if that's what's gonna happen, we're gonna still praise you. We tried to reach out to those people who gave us strikes. They refused. The matter of fact, one of them demanded us to pay him money, a lot of money, and he's our fellow African brother. So you guys have to pay, this amount of money. Anyway, they wanted us, for that brother, he wanted us to pay him $1,000. I was like, man, I don't have that money. I'm not gonna do anything. So I was ready. I was actually ready to lose the channel, because that person, he said, you have to give us, $1,000 in order for us to remove the channel. We reached out again to have a conversation. We asked a little bit for reduction. The guy said, we don't have nothing to talk about, fellow Africans. Why? Because there were 30, I think it was 15-second video, part of the video that it was being used, and we asked for it, but that's what has happened, right? So we thank God that at least there's a hope right now, because we have only 1 strike that has left it in our channel. That means one strike has already been lifted up, so at least we can breathe a little bit. But these are some of the internal issues that we go through. You can only imagine for the past 3 months how we were living. We're living like our spirit, our heart were just like here. You're waking up every single morning, you're trying to check. It reached the time where I did not want to open YouTube channel. I did not want to open, because I was like, man, if I open and then I see there's no channel, what am I gonna do? I did not want to do that. It's a scary thing, man. Guys, it's a scary thing. And especially if you, for the past 5-6 years, you put your blood, sweat, and tears to develop the channel, to develop the project, to connect all the people across the world and bring people together to just stand for one Africa. You're doing a noble work. I'm not doing anything illegal here, just promoting Africa and do that. And then the reality, knowing just one day you could wake up and everything is gone. Yeah, that was pretty scary. So I think I've learned my lesson, that we should not really depend on this platform as much as we can, because we could lose any time. So right now, that's how I'm living. If it's there, cool. If I have like 1,000 viewers in a month, cool. If I have like 4 million in a month, cool. If you guys support, cool. If you don't, cool. I'll just keep doing what I do behind and on the screen whenever I can, right? So that is what we've decided. And I think you guys have seen that, actually, that in many of African content creators, I've seen a lot of them, they don't really last on what we are doing here, right? So we thank God that we're doing here for 5 years plus, but most of them, they don't, because of things like this that I'm sharing right now. But we thank God for those who are always sticking with us. We thank God for your prayer and your support and your thoughts and everything that you do. You guys are helping us to move forward. All right.